Alan Dershowitz, welcome to the program. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm very concerned about what's going on in the Manhattan courthouse today because it could hurt America more than it could even hurt Donald Trump. This is the weakest, worst case I've seen in my 60 years of practicing law.
Jeez.
And because it's New York and because this is a jury of New Yorkers and a judge, there might be a conviction here. It would be a horrible, horrible blemish, stain on the American justice system if that were to happen.
You know, Jonathan Turley wrote a great article, I don't know if you saw it, about this trial. And the last line is something along the lines of, a three-legged stool in every court case. And, this is the most wobbly without a leg to stand on. And he said, it's not Donald Trump standing on that stool. That is, that's something that's going to affect all of us deeply. And yeah. I don't even know what it means if a court like this can find any man guilty like this because he's unpopular. Where is justice, Alan?
Or because he's too popular in this case.
Yeah.
It means that we're becoming more like, we're not there, but more like Stalin and Lavrenti Beria's Soviet Union, where Beria said to Stalin, show me the man and I'll find you the crime. Look, I wrote a book called Get Trump. That's the only explanation for this case going forward, a desire to get Trump. The people, the prosecutors campaigned on the pledge to get Trump. They said they would find a crime. They couldn't find the crime because there is no crime. So they made one up. They put an expired misdemeanor together with some thought crimes, and they came up with an absurd felony in this case. And then they had to use as their main witness a guy who has a long, long history of lying, stealing, and they have to depend on his credibility to prove that Trump actually knew that these payments were being made and were being listed as legal payments rather than as reimbursement for a non-disclosure agreement. It's the most absurd case.
I wonder if Cohen will even be charged with a crime. He admitted under oath that he stole. No?
Yeah. I was hoping for a Perry Mason moment where when he said that on the witness stand, the police would come in and put the handcuffs on him and take him away. But that didn't happen. It should have.
Yeah. Tell me, I was on a jury once, and the judge... We kept asking him, and he would come in, and he'd say, I can't tell you anything. I can't tell you that. We'd ask the bailiff, can we get this from the judge, et cetera. And the judge, I don't know, he was in a position of power, and he really seemed like our friend and really seemed like we could trust him to make the right decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a real problem with our system of justice. This judge, for example, is a benevolent despot when the jury is there. He's so nice. He's to the jury. But as soon as the jury goes out, and I was in the courtroom, I was one of the only spectators allowed to stay in the courtroom when he emptied the courthouse, the courtroom of all reporters. Then his true sense came out. He looked like remember the psycho in Taxi Driver? Yeah. You talking to me? You looking at me? You talking to me? That's what he was basically saying to the witness. He hated the fact that the witness
raised his eyebrows,
or stared at him, and he threatened to strike the witness's testimony. The jury should have seen that, and by the way, the American public should have seen it. The whole case should have been on television.
So, Alan,
and the fact that it isn't on television is terrible.
The thing here with the judge, he gives the instructions.
Yeah.
How horribly could that go wrong with him, or are there some limits to what he gives as instructions?
The limits come in the Court of Appeals, and that might come only after the election. For example, the crucial instruction is going to be, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution could have called Alan Weisselberg. He was the other person at that alleged meeting where the crime occurred, and the only other witness at that meeting was Cohen, who you shouldn't believe. But Weisselberg could have been called. The prosecution didn't call him. They could have given immunity if he had pleaded the Fifth Amendment, but they didn't do it. And you should therefore infer that had they called him, he would have given testimony adverse to the prosecution.
But he can't
gives
say
that
that in the
instruction.
closing. He can't say that in closing arguments, right?
He can if the judge allows that instruction to be given. If I were the defense attorney, let me tell you what I would do. I would get a life-size picture of Alan Weisselberg. I would put it in the witness stand, and I would say, ladies and gentlemen, you see this picture? That's all you're going to see, just the picture, because the prosecution made a decision not to call this witness. And when you go in that jury room, I want you to be thinking of that picture. I want you to think of why only a picture and not the real witness appeared in this courtroom. And, would the judge allow that? I don't know. I would try it, certainly.
And he cannot bring up that the FEC was not allowed to.
No, he's not going to be able to bring that up. There's a lot of things he can't bring up. He wasn't allowed to introduce an expert witness who is the country's leading expert on the FEC. The jury is going to be allowed to conclude that maybe this was an election fraud, even though the experts say it wasn't. So there's a lot of problems with this case.
Alan, what does your gut tell you that's going to happen after the closing arguments on both sides?
My gut says possibly hung jury. Let me tell you why. I was in the courtroom and I was watching the jurors very carefully, and I couldn't tell whether they were inclined toward conviction or acquittal. What I could tell is they didn't seem to like each other that much. They didn't seem to have a close relationship, which jurors sometimes have. And that inclines one to think that maybe they won't agree, maybe they'll be hung jury. But we won't know.